Yeah, yeah. Pastor Dad Podcast, Acts 420. We can't stay quiet. Huh!
Hey everyone, the other day I put out on the Facebook group, I put out a Facebook page rather. I put out a teaser of the various topics I wanted to cover. And these are just topics that have been kind of swimming in my head lately and been wondering when I could get around to recording something about it. And one of them, the highest vote count, I should say, was one entitled, an episode entitled The Death of Nuance. And for the thumbnail, I used to sort of market that episode, that idea, was an image of some federal agents. I don't think that they're ICE agents. It doesn't really matter. I think they're Homeland Security or something like that. But and then flanking either side of that, which you would have seen if, when this goes on YouTube, you would have seen the thumbnail anyway. But flanking either side of that group of agents was an image of Renee Good on one side and Alex Preddy, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on the other. And the idea of this episode, The Death of Nuance, is just to get to the idea that we have seemingly lost our way as a society when it comes to arguing for a position. And we've lost our way, not in the sense that we don't know what we believe in. Unfortunately, it's almost that we don't know why we believe it. And so you see this happen on left and right. I think it happens quite a bit more on one side of that than the other. But the idea that you can't, you just look for whatever the news, the headline is. You look for whatever position it seems like your side is supposed to take, and then you just scurry to that end of the or that side of the equation. And when it comes to stories like Renee Good and Alex Preddy, who I'm sure by now you're aware, lost their lives in altercations with or involvement with ICE agents or some similar group that were working toward the same ends as ICE agents. And again, we come back to this idea that we neatly categorize ourselves, that we tribalize, we find out whatever position we're supposed to have, we take that position very, very hard, and that's it. And I'm afraid that if we can't begin to take more nuanced looks at things that are happening in society, we will cease to be a civilized society. And I think in large part, we've already seen that happen. And I'm hopeful that we can come back from that. I mean, you look at human history and you see very clearly that that this ebbs and flows. I mean, maybe back in the days of Rodney King and the riots in LA and these things, you might look back at that and say, if you lived in that, if you lived through that, and that was a very prominent thing. I was pretty young at the time and didn't really pay much attention to it. I wasn't around me geographically, and wasn't watching the news at that time, but I'm aware of it, right? It was big enough that I was aware of it, even though I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But I imagine at that time, people were thinking, man, it's crazy. It's a crazy time to be alive. Just the world can't get any nuttier. The divisiveness, the division, the hate, the vitriol, all this stuff. And I imagine they thought, this is about as bad as it gets. And you look at something like this situation today and you think again, man, I don't know how we could be more divided than we are. And I'm tempted to feel that way myself, except I look back at history and I see this ebb and flow of these cycles that seem to correct themselves after a time. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't say that the one that we're living in right now seems to be a particularly one marked by excess and lack of thinking and just tribalistic, behavior. Impulse, everything's about feelings, and it's like, maybe we are in that irrecoverable place where we can't come back from this. I don't want to believe that. I believe, my faith tells me that nothing is too big for God to fix. No one is too lost for Jesus to save. And so I need to apply that practically to what I see in front of me today and every day. But I think it's just in just a rationalistic philosophical way, just to think through this, not apart from faith, but not necessitated by faith. As a strictly secular person, hopefully you could appreciate this, but that if we can't begin to nuance our positions and look for layers of things, I think that we are kind of doomed as a civilized, so-called, air quotes, civilized society. So what I mean by nuance, if you look at these situations, look at these stories with Alex and Renee, and one group is just tripping over themselves to mourn the loss, and the other side is tripping over themselves to decry this as justice or Darwin Award type of behavior. And not every reaction is as heartless as that, but many of them are, and many on the left are every bit as unthinking as to just rush to the idea that this is a really tragic thing. Well, I want to say, can we nuance our positions? Can we give it long enough? And I've seen, actually, on that front, I've seen people say things like, lately you see a story and it evokes some emotion, and automatically we want to sort ourselves and pulls at our heartstrings. So we start adjusting our what we think is going to be our opinion about this, based upon how we feel at the outset of that thing. And wisely, some people have cautioned for some, let's wait and see kind of approach. Like, we don't know what the details were on these things, so let's wait and see. Let's wait for the facts to come out, and then we can pronounce our position, wherever that might be. And others have responded to this, saying, "Oh, I'm done waiting for the facts." Like, do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself saying that? And what it means. And certainly, this was close to home. If this was somebody you knew, you cared about. Now, if you're on the left, you think about maybe it's somebody you grew up with and you were friends with, and they became a federal agent, and certainly you'd want to have a nuanced position then. Or perhaps you're a diehard conservative, but your friends, your neighbors with Renee Good, and certainly in that you would probably have, I would hope you would have, a nuanced position about your reaction to this. And so we need to be able to hold in tension that two things can be true at the same time. It can be, first of all, it can be tragic that somebody like a Renee, like an Alex, who, for all intents and purposes had most of their years yet to live. I imagine. I don't know how old they were, but I imagine they had as many years in front of them as they had behind them, all things considered. And so it can be tragic that all those years were forfeited, and it can also be true at the same time that very unfortunate that this didn't need to happen. In either case, I mean, if you're coming to this only believing that it's a tragedy that they died, and not also saying, man, I would if my friends were going to tell me they're going to go do this, going to take part in obstructing federal law enforcement agents from doing their jobs, and carrying that out. I, as a friend, would say, "Hey, are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure this is the right path?" I would even argue, my position being more favorable probably to law enforcement. I would argue in favor of, hey, that's not even probably. Be careful, because what you're thinking about doing is probably not even legal, and you could get yourself in a bad way if you're getting entangled with the affairs and the actions of law enforcement. In both cases, I see a healthy dose of that, illegal behavior, inviting violence. And so I see and I hear the reaction on one side saying how tragic that they were killed. And I say yes and amen. I agree with that. But I also would say, couldn't you have stood on the sidewalks with your sign on a stick, and you have every right in the world constitutionally to oppose, to gather, to to protest. You have those rights afforded to you. What you don't have the right to do is interfere in a lawful law enforcement situation. And so I want to say that I am afraid that if we don't reverse course here, where on both sides, again, I'm not trying to be a centrist. I fall on one side of this in my own opinions. I think it was tragically stupid what these two individuals did. I do, and I would be quite upset if any of my children decided they were going to take their protests, and perform them in that way. I would be very disappointed and worried for them. And so I'd have much to say to them about that. Even if I differ with what they're protesting or what their signs that they're holding say, I would say that there's a right way to do that. If that's your position, if that's the thing that you're fighting for, and there's an inappropriate way to do it. And certainly in Alex Preddy's case, bringing a firearm, a loaded firearm, to a place where you not only probably plan to have some sort of interaction to a physical level with law enforcement, but you already have done that. You've already, kicked the taillights out of a vehicle. It's utter foolishness to do that and to think you're going to walk away. And we think that because people think that because we live in such a nation where there generally isn't much in the way of consequences for bad behavior. And we've gotten used to that. And so people feel a false sense of security in just about doing anything. During the summer of love, as they're coining it, the whole George Floyd, setting literal city blocks on fire, and torching businesses and things, this became normal behavior. In no small part due to the media's very extremely irresponsible reporting of it. Mostly peaceful protests while there's fires blazing behind them, and people are literally dying. And I want to say, is there some medium where the same people that were advocating for that and thinking that's just me protesting, where there's some middle of the road or more nuanced position where I don't have to side with literally crazy talking points in order to oppose what I think is socially unacceptable. So go ahead and feel as though Derek, I think Derek Chauvin or whatever his name was, the police officer, go ahead and feel as though he used too much force and was the cause of George Floyd's death. And now, in retrospect, I don't know that I think that's the case. In fact, I'm leaning towards not the case when you find out how much was in his system, in George Floyd's system. But that's why we wait. That's why we wait to have more nuanced opinions on things, more nuanced takes on things, so that we're not rushing to judgment. And the benefit of that is not least of all that we might be more civilized in our response to those that we think might take a different position than us, but also saving ourselves from the egg on our face if we have jumped to a conclusion prematurely. And so I think the solution here is not to look for the left's take or the right's take on any issue, but to say that I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and see. And if I care enough to have an opinion that's sharp, that's pronounced, I care enough to have a position that is loud. I'm going to care enough to also research and wait and kind of for the facts to come out, and care that I get it right. Again, if only because I don't want to be embarrassed by the facts when they do come out. I'll wait and see. And I think that's the way that we have to take everything. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Jeff, I haven't seen you do much with to do that on with conservative issues. And believe me, I have a litany of topics written down in which I would like to take issue with, take umbrage with many of the things that I see coming from the from the mouth of in the pen of Donald Trump. A whole lot that I differ with, a whole lot that I disagree with, and want to speak out about. Why I haven't is the reason I haven't put out many episodes at all is because of the time that it takes to do it, that I don't have. But also, I do believe in nuancing even my approach to this, where I'm going to tackle the most, the issues that have the most bearing on what a healthy society might look like. And certainly Donald Trump is knocking on the door of a couple of those that warrants a response, and many have responded to him. I think it's a dangerous thing to just get our guy in the office and say, okay, everything he does can be nothing but good. But I mean, we all watched 4 years of Joe Biden barely being able to walk, and nobody said boo about it. I mean, I don't think I have a single liberal friend who said anything at all about worrying about the mental state, mental capacity of this guy that was like organs wrapped in skin and just like stumbling all over himself. Couldn't string together a sentence, was hiding from the public. And so it's a little bit rich when we look at this back and forth, and I'm doing this hypothetically because nobody said this to me. I'm just anticipating this might be the response, but it would be a little bit rich to suggest that we should, with both barrels, just tackle every issue that knock down every issue that comes up as a conservative talking point, when so much passed for just with normalization. I hate that term. Let's normalize this. Let's normalize that. How about we just let normal mean what it means? And abnormal behavior is maybe not behavior that deserves to be normalized. And I think we saw a whole lot of that. We're still seeing the fallout of that during the Biden administration, and all the many irons that they had in the fire that were just like they advanced like crazy, literally crazy talking points. The whole transgender thing. You cannot be a consistently biblical Christian and believe that. You can't. This is a Pastor Dad channel, Pastor Dad podcast. The Bible is my authority, all things faith and practice, and you cannot be a consistently biblical Christian and believe in most leftist talking points. You can't. It's just not possible. Now, you can challenge me on that. Go ahead and jump in the comments. I'm going to anticipate a whole lot of mangled, out of context citations of scriptures that most of the commenters don't spend any time reading or studying. They found a talking point that they think sells their point, and makes somebody like myself look bad. And so I'm getting off my train of thought, but I'm anticipating the response of some of these things. But I think on both sides, to end this on sort of a fair note, I think both sides really need to continue, as difficult as it sometimes is, when emotions are running high and you're already sort of on the edge of being done with any of your friends that don't align with you politically. Why don't you sit down and have a conversation with them? Why don't you sit down and have a conversation with those friends you think you differ with on everything, and try to calmly and lovingly talk it through with them? What parts of the story of the Renee Good or Alex Preddy can we possibly find common ground about? And then maybe find out that you don't hate that person quite as much as you were prepared to, because life isn't always, not everything that happens is always black and white and easy to dissect. Or to have an informed opinion on. And so my challenge to you is this, my plea with you is this, that you will have a more nuanced take, and practice doing that with everything. You think you have a particular view on capitalism, nuance it. Why do you have that view? You think you have a particular view on the pro-life, pro-choice argument. Why do you believe that? What is, take that 3 or 4 layers deep and say, what do I really truly believe about this? I'm going to turn this conversation over to something that's been super helpful for me theologically, and I wish that there were books like this written politically. But there's a couple couple of different publishers. I think Zondervan is one, and I believe Baker is the other one, I believe. And they have a series of books that are they're called counterpoints or viewpoints. And what it is, real briefly, what it is that there's a like 3 or 4, sometimes 5 authors that are main contributors to this book. And usually the books are just a few hundred pages. They're not very long. So the chapters are kind of essay length, or long essay, but not very long, like 30 pages, or so. And what they do is like each author will take a main chapter and present a positive case for why they believe X, Y, or Z about some theological view. And then the other 3 or 4 or 5 authors, however many are in it, they'll all respond to that view. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think then the main author of that first main chapter will then come back and respond to all the critics, but very briefly in like one mini chapter. And then the next author will do the same thing and write a chapter steel manning their position and presenting as best a positive case as they can for their position, and then the other authors respond like they did in the previous round. By the end of these books, what I find 2 things that happen, for the most part. By the end of these books, I have a much greater appreciation for why these authors take the various views that they take. I'm almost never left with like, wow, I can't believe how idiotic that person's position is. I have an appreciation for their position, even if I still differ with it. So that's the first thing, is I have a greater appreciation for the diversity of ideas and how people legitimately come to these ideas. A lot of times people use the straw man where they present a really terrible case for their opposition that's easy to knock over and easy to defeat, and they say, what a terrible position. But then you realize that nobody that believes in that position actually argues for it that way. And so we should always be looking for allowing the horse to speak for himself, and mangled that phrase. You want to get it from the horse's mouth. And so that's the first thing, is I get a greater appreciation for the views that I say that I differ with. And then secondly, a greater understanding of why I land where I do, if it's the same spot that it was before I read the books. Now, the more informed you are theologically, the more likely it is that you can read those books and not change your mind at all, because you already have some rudimentary understanding of what those different positions are. But if you don't, just be prepared. You get one of those books and just be prepared to be blown away by some of the things that you've never heard in your faith tradition. Maybe you never heard these things put this way. Now, I should clarify, these books are not different faith traditions altogether. These are Christian theology books, wherein each of the authors takes a slightly different view of what they think the Bible says about whatever topic. And so it's not like Muslims debating against Christians or anything like that. Those would be interesting as well. But that's not what I'm talking about. These are in-house debates, internal debates within Christianity. But it's very helpful for those 2 reasons, and probably more. But it helps you to nuance your position. Why do I think that I believe the way that I believe? It's not just important what we believe. It's important to be able to articulate why we believe it. And again, if I'm getting hot under the collar about any topic that I'm covering, that I'm talking about, I better have done some serious homework, that warranted me getting so emotionally invested in it. But what I find is that actually the most emotional arguments are, generally speaking, proffered by the least informed person. That is to say that the louder that you get, the more likely it is, I believe, that you actually haven't done the homework to deserve to be as loud as you're being, because you don't really know what you're talking about. I find that to be true theologically. I find it to be true politically, and just about every other which way. It is the loudest proponent of a view you can almost bet is going to be the least read, the least informed. And so that should be telling. If you are that person, that should be telling to you. It should be informative to you. If I care about it this much to yell about it, do I care about it enough to study it? Do I care about it enough to dissect the issue and to find out where I actually land? Now, coming back to the issue at hand, the whole idea of being nuanced with political matters, I wish they had series of books. If you know about any books like this, drop them in the comments, because I'd love to hear about it. But until then, we're gonna have to do this homework ourselves. We're gonna have to do this work ourselves. We're gonna have to value our neighbor enough to say, I'm going to suspend judgment. Can't talk. I'm going to suspend judgment on this long enough to understand why it is they believe what they think they believe, and find out that maybe they have some good points to be made. But as long as we are just rushing to the left or the right and finding our tribe, and we will be a non-thinking society. And it's a non-thinking society that is able to devolve into a brutal and savage society. And so if we want to, if we don't want to have seen our most civilized days, as in the rear view mirror, we want to be able to think about a future where we are advancing in our civility, advancing in our dialogue, advancing in our ability to debate. We have to be willing to disagree, but we have to be also willing to entertain the idea. I might disagree right now, but maybe with some more study, maybe with some more learning, I wouldn't disagree. And be willing to change your mind. Maybe it's a little bit daunting. It may be a little bit scary to say, I don't know. But whoever said that you had to be certain about every single thing you believe all the time? Isn't it better if you can humbly admit to somebody, I'm not sure what I believe about that because I've never done the homework necessary for me to earn the right to be certain about something. And so that's my caution for you. If we want a civilized society, if we want a society at all to continue, we have got to learn to nuance our positions and be able to say that two things can be true at the same time. We can land. I'm not advocating for middle ground on everything. Sometimes middle ground is just being passive and non-committal. What I'm advocating for is get close enough to the middle to at least see the other side for what they're actually saying, not for what you want to believe that they're saying. And I think we'll all be better off for it. So, finally got another one done. This is Pastor Dad signing off. Until we see you in the next one, take care.
Yeah. Pastor Dad Podcast, X420. We can't stay quiet. Huh! Hey! Ho! Bible open on the table, news feed burning on my phone. Kids watching, I'm accountable for what I call truth at home. Faith in the middle of the chaos, Christ over parties and polls. If the culture wanna press us, confess us, we speak what we've seen, and we know we cannot help but speak.